Trends are, in essence, the sort of before and after. These are the things that aren't snapshots in time. It's very, very easy to get kind of swayed by, oh, I saw this big thing in the news, or I saw this thing on the media, or oh, everyone's talking about this, and it's just a snapshot in time that can then skew your decision making. What we're after in digital and social media particularly are looking for trends that have been quite reliable changes in either behavioural patterns over time that allow us to then make good decisions about what we're going to do into the future. So the ones I'm going to sort of cover with you, so there's mobility as an important one, community, data, sustainability and ethics, that's a huge one for 2020, audio, influencers, and probably to a lesser extent, but still on the chart, AR and VR. So these are really, really important. I guess you could call them contexts that your target customer is living in. So this is the world that your target customer is living in, and some of these might open up opportunities, and threats to you to allow you to sort of maybe look at their world slightly differently. Just look at their world and think, we could actually engage with them in a slightly different way to the way that we've been doing it. And a lot of the time, what this might do is kind of reinvent how you describe social, for example. So rather than social media being something that is, a set of tools that you see on a smartphone or on your desktop computer, actually social becomes a channel through which you can use the concept of mobility. And I'll start with that one as an example. So what do we mean by mobility? Well, mobility basically is the understanding that your target customers are viewing your content, your digital content, from a different perspective based on physically where they are. Okay, so mobility kind of opens up a whole bunch of opportunities here. If you can show that your customers are opening your emails or engaging with you on social media, maybe between the hours of 7:30 and 8:30 on a weekday morning, there's probably a very, very high percentage chance that the reason they're doing that is because they're commuting and they're looking and checking their social media and their emails. So really, really simple little example. Mobility also is a really important one to consider because the amount of screen real estate, as it's called, that's available to you to get your messages across obviously has significantly dropped in recent years. Gone are the days where we can actually look at things like the sort of laptops and even tablets in terms of screen size. When you look at, for example, your Google Analytics and see, what kind of devices are people using to come to our website, as an example, I will almost guarantee that you'll have seen in the last 12 to 24 months a trend significantly to screen sizes of this size. Okay, so everybody is moving and trending towards smartphone access and smartwatch and even smaller devices than that. But if we just kind of stick with the whole trend towards smartphones right now, what it means is that you've got very little real estate, so pixel space on the screen, to be able to get your message across. So, of course, that's materialised or manifested in the way that we've used videos, obviously the power of imagery, and obviously picture tells 1,000 words, so we can get so much more messaging across in an image now, maybe with just a little caption to it, than actually a long form block of text. But that's not to say that's the only way we can do it, because if you can get very engaging imagery that kind of makes people stop and take note, particularly if it is on their commute, for example, that could be, if you can engage at the right time, the moment when actually they are going to spend a little bit more time than they would on average with you, because they've got that little bit of extra time. So maybe the mobility says, okay, well actually, because I've got my phone with me, they've just promoted their new podcast, I'll have a little listen, because I've got another 30 minutes on my commute, so now's a good time, I'll grab it now. So if we can understand what our persona's doing throughout their day, and this is professional intimacy, understand where they are, what they're doing on average on their day, then we can start to tap into their world, and so be doing things in the right media, using the right content through the right channels on the right device, smartphone, at the right time of day. And of course, if our competitors aren't doing that, then they're just hitting the big screens with big amounts of data and, hey, watch my big, long, super long video. And they're doing that halfway through the morning when the person's in a meeting or when they're on site or when they're in surgery, depending obviously on the persona's job, then there's no chance they're going to see it. And they wonder why it didn't work. So obviously there's a huge amount of intimacy that goes on with this mobile because it's in the palm of your customer's hand. So just tapping into time of day, day of week gives us a really good opportunity here to really step into the shoes of the customer. Next one is community. This is a really important one. Community is ever increasing and ever bigger. It's very, very unlikely now that we're tapping into one individual decision maker. So if we're in business to business, B2B, they're part of a community. They're probably part of a community in their professionalism. So they could be part of a marketing community, part of a buying community, production community, R&D community. They're going to be part of a bunch of influencers and a group of people who can really play into your hands. And it's really about understanding when you're trying to market to this target customer, understand who their community is, because if you can be seen and active within their community, there's a really good chance that that will increase the relevance that you have as a brand. So irrespective of product or service, you've got to be thinking about what is their world, what communities are they part of. And these aren't just professional communities, they can also be leisure communities as well. So it's really understanding the lifestyle thing that's going on. Another big trend is the power and really sort of influence really of the data that you have as an organisation. The whole kind of big data thing, and I always sort of use in terms of big sort of content data, the likes of LinkedIn. Huge big data resource available to you. You've only got to search on certain topics within LinkedIn to see literally tens of thousands of articles, people commenting, and then sort of allowing yourself to kind of, it's not just trending topics, it's kind of, you know, some of these real sort of deeper thought leadership things around a particular subject. So the power inside the data that you have available to you every single year is just, you know, it's a cumulative effect. It's just, you know, ever increasing. So I'd certainly recommend that you start thinking about, okay, what kind of topics could our product, service and or brand and or our people be involved in this wider world, in these communities in which this target customer is active? Because this is a big trend. You know, brands that are really successfully, you know, integrating digital into their whole kind of sales and marketing processes are the ones who really understand how to tap into these topics. So it's not about talking about your own products and services, it's talking about the topics that really resonate with this target persona in the communities in which they're active, using the kind of channels and tools that they're going to be using on a day-to-day basis. So it starts to get more and more complicated. No longer is it just about you and what you've got to sell and what you've got to market. It's all about their world. Another one as well, which is a huge one for 2020, is sustainability and ethics. I mean, certainly with the whole Extinction Rebellion sort of, you know, big push, and a lot of the media obviously talking last year about, you know, it's not a case now of if, it's a case of, you know, what. We know it's coming, you know, this whole sort of cataclysmic sort of disaster for the planet if we don't do anything. So we know the if, we know the what. Now it's all about the how. How are we as an organisation going to respond to this? We've seen this sort of increasing over the last sort of 5 to 10 years as the whole sort of very cynical, very sort of data savvy, very connected millennial generation are coming through now as budget holders. So these are now the decision makers. These are the really kind of sort of influencers, if you like, now. They're not just taking your brand for granted. They're not looking at your brand and thinking, oh, it's a good price. Yeah, it's a good product or service. Yeah, I'll buy it. They're actually now looking much more deeply into kind of who you are as an organisation. Are you ethical? Are you sustainable? Can you actually back this up with evidence, not kind of greenwashing messages of corporate social responsibility? This is all about, are you for real? What are your people like? You know, what are your brand values? What's your higher purpose as an organisation? Oh, it's to make profit. Don't like that. I'm going to go down the road and go to somebody else who's more ethical and sustainable. So it's your responsibility now in 2020 to really think of this as, probably the single most powerful trend that allows you to almost kind of reinvent your messages. If you don't have a really set of clear statements about higher value that you have as an organisation, about how you're reducing your carbon footprint, about how your leadership and management behave with and through their staff and their teams, how you develop your people, how you're making very ethical profit or spending grant funding in an appropriate way. If you're not making that very open and transparent, you're already going backwards. Okay, this is a fundamental thing that you have to do in your content strategy. We'll come on to content strategy later, but this is very much a thing that you can't get away from this now. This is happening. As we went over that 2019 to 2020 kind of tipping point, this side of 2020 now feels like it. As I say, it's not a case of if and what, it's a case of how. How are you going to do this? You have to integrate this stuff into your messages. And the reason you have to do that is because this is going to be demanded, if it already isn't today, by your persona tomorrow. And it's not tomorrow 2 years' time, it's tomorrow, literally. Another big trend, huge big trend, and I think this one comes about partly as a sort of a measure between the whole sort of lack of time that most people and organisations have, but also the whole kind of flexibility of these things and actually having this kind of access in the palm of your hand is this massive growth of podcasts. And the use of audio, so voice search, for example, is already there. You can search through Siri and Alexa, and many others are available for pretty much everything that you want. It is now sort of part and parcel of how we try and optimise the time we have available as consumers. Audio, again, sort of reinvented itself in the second half of 2019 when Apple basically retired iTunes and split it out to Apple TV, Apple Music and Apple Podcasts. Wow, Apple Podcasts up there with Apple Music and Apple TV. They're two big flagship sort of brands, and now they've got Apple Podcasts up there at the same kind of level. This is a big commitment by one of the world's biggest brands, and if they're doing it, that shows that the trend is already here. So the big question is, how are you going to think about the concept of audio and use audio as part of your story going forward? If you're already producing video, you've got audio. You just strip out the audio channel, you've got yourself a podcast. If you're creating content like blogs, any kind of thought leadership stuff, any kind of educational things, you've got yourself audio because you just narrate over the top of it. You don't need a big production crew to come in and do it. You literally just pick up your smartphone, you press voice recorder and you record it. It's as simple as that. So we're not looking at huge high production values here. We're looking at short, sharp, bite-sized chunks of audio content that's very searchable, but that also can be then repurposed as a podcast. And people are consuming this in a growing number. So now is the time to be doing that. And another one that we've seen as well, which is very important, and this isn't going to go away, is the whole power of influencers. Now, depending on your brand, obviously we're probably here in this room not necessarily looking at your kind of Kim Kardashian influencers, your big sort of super influencers with tens and hundreds of millions of sort of followers. What we're looking at here are what we might call micro-influencers, and these are really important within the sectors that you're targeting. So when we talk about micro-influencers, these are individuals, and it will be individuals, who have a significant and influential voice that will be influencing your purchaser, your target customer, your persona that you're after. We all have influencers, even though if you're like me, you sort of think, no, I'm an independent person, I'm not influenced by anybody. We are all influenced by others. I'm a digital marketer and I'm influenced by a small number of other digital marketers. I watch and listen to what they do, and yes, I adapt my tone of voice and what I'm talking about, and I capture some of the trends through listening and watching them, and they do the same. None of us are in isolation. So the trick, the big trick here, is to figure out who in your target persona, your target customer's world, are they being influenced by. And this might be from a professional basis, could be from a personal basis, or it could be from a family and peers basis, who in their organisation, for example, is influencing them. It doesn't always come from above. It's not necessarily just their line manager or their management team. It can also be somebody who they were actually working with. In certain industries, it can also be people who are thought leaders, bloggers, vloggers, journalists, the media. You've got to figure out who these people are being influenced by. The reason you need to do that is because, of course, what you want to do is you want to get them on side. If you can get micro-influencers as really key advocates, they will then be passing the message on with the reviews and the stories that they're going to share of the good stuff that you're doing. And of course, then that indirectly and often subconsciously will influence the person you're trying to appeal to. So influencers is a very, very growing trend. This is one we've had for quite a number of years, but the concept of micro-influencer is really here to stay, and it's not going to go anywhere. And certainly with the power of content and availability of content and the ease of publishing, we've got to make sure that we get to a point where the influencers themselves are very relevant, but also very engaged with our brand, and that's going to be a really important thing, certainly for 2020 and beyond. So I'd certainly strongly encourage you to kind of think of these trends as big opportunities, threats if you don't do anything about them, and know that they're here whether or not you decide to ignore them, because they are going to be picked up by the competition, they're going to be picked up by others, and I would suggest probably these are some of the most positive things that you can kind of latch onto and piggyback onto. Your challenge obviously is to figure out how you're going to do that.